Hey everyone, welcome back to the latest module in the faculty workshop on social media. And this is Dale again. And this week's topic is really important. In fact, this might be the most important module that we talk about because today we're going to be talking about how to create that content and the strategy that goes behind it. And this is where Gary Vaynerchuk's book comes into play. So, we have ordered copies of this book for all of y'all who signed up for the workshop. One really important thing, this isn't a textbook by any means. In fact, some of it's outdated already. That's the problem with a social media book, is that it's already outdated by the time it gets printed. But the first couple of chapters tackle content creation in a way that really resonates with the students. In fact, I'm still getting emails and tweets from students who took the class, and they're still using the terminology that Gary lays out in the book. And so, because of that, I think it's worthy to continue framing the content discussion for this class using his terminology. And what he does is he has come up with a boxing analogy to describe the difference or the different types of content that we see in social when it comes to not just branding or brands and businesses, but also journalists too. It applies to that. So I'll explain what I mean by that throughout this upcoming module. The first way that he brings in boxing to this is by the use of the jab. So if you know anything about a jab, this is just kind of one of those light punches to perhaps set the scene, although that might not be light if that was your face that was getting connected. But they're not the knockout punch, right? A jab is just a constant, steady flow of punches. And Gary Vaynerchuk says jabs are the lightweight pieces of content that benefit your customers by making them laugh, snicker, ponder, play a game, feel appreciated, or escape. This is the everyday content that is not asking them to do something. You're not asking them to buy something. You're not asking them to sign up for something. You're just simply providing content and hopefully having a conversation, having some sort of engagement with someone on a social level. So a couple of examples of that. Jimmy John's is really great on Twitter, especially last year during the VMAs when Kanye West gave his talk. That was a very nice tweet that went out. Of course, it went viral very quickly. I've been using the word viral a lot. I don't like talking about viral stuff because I don't really believe in that. But it was spread quite often, let me say that. Last fall when the Straight Outta Compton movie came out and everybody was creating those images that they were allowing, Whataburger went ahead and did that for one. That got shared quite a bit. And then Nike also. I mean, you name it, with brands that do great on social in terms of communicating with customers. But here's an example of someone saying they got some new Nikes, and Nike said they have no excuse to miss a workout then. This is all everyday content. It sets the stage, it sets the tone for your brand's voice on social. So all those jabs eventually lead up to the right hook, which, if you know anything about boxing, the right hook is the knockout shot, right? So when Gary talks about the right hook, these are the calls to action that benefit your businesses. So in other words, those jabs are setting it up. And then if you do a great job with those jabs, when you do eventually have a right hook, it should work much more effectively if done properly. So a couple of keys regarding your right hook content. The call to action must be simple and easy to understand, must be perfectly crafted for mobile, and it respects the nuances of different networks, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Here are some examples of some really good right hooks. And by the way, all of these examples come from students. I asked them on the first day of class which brands they enjoyed following on social. And so I went through all of those brands and found examples that showed why students might be interested in following those. So I know we had several of y'all in the Facebook group that said you don't follow any brands. And, that's your decision. I'm not here to say one way or another. But having ways to find positive examples of these is really important. And having the students help you with that is a great way to do that. Taco Bell is a massive favorite amongst the students. They do right hooks very well. So they're asking people to buy with their app, and they provide the link to download it. That would be a right hook. State Farm in the middle. If you've seen the Jake with State Farm ads or Jake from State Farm, they were doing a live chat with him. So that's an Instagram post that went out. Also, when Star Wars was coming out late last year, Target did a poll with that, and then in terms of the right hook, wanted you to then go and buy toys involving those particular characters. So just a couple of quick examples of right hooks that hopefully, if they reach their point, will be considered a knockout in terms of the effectiveness of the message and did it deliver on the call to action. You pepper the customer or the audience with jabs, then when you eventually do throw the right hook, you have softened them up and up to where they are a fan of the brand, they engage with the brand, they interact with the brand. Hopefully that brand loyalty is now there, and it should work much more effectively. So the question I ask students is, which do users want more of? Do we like being hit with calls to action all the time? This is kind of the TV news advertising portion of this. We fast forward through those ads a lot of the time. And so, of course, we want the jabs more, right? If we're going to make that conscious decision to follow a brand or follow a journalist on social, we want that personal life, or we want the engagement aspect of it. We want something out of it other than them just constantly asking of us. The problem is, what do brands focus most on? And of course, that is the right hook. So we have to somehow reverse that trend in order to make those right hooks more effective. And the struggle is real when it comes to that. So let's talk about content specifically here in for just a second. Gary has six characteristics of great content. One, that it's native, it doesn't interrupt, it doesn't make demands often, leverages pop culture, it's micro, and it's consistent. So we're going to go through each of these, and I'll explain them. He also does a great job in the book. So once you get the book, read the first 2 chapters, and all of this, of course, will be covered in much more detail. So the first characteristic is it's native. And what I mean by that is that each social network has its own way of being, right? It has its own personality. Twitter, for instance, is very textual. Instagram is very visual. Facebook's a nice mix of both. Vine is a video platform. Periscope's a live platform. You must respect the nuances of each social network in terms of how you create your content. Pushing Twitter content to Facebook or Facebook content to Instagram is not going to work. So again, each social network has its own identity. Therefore, your content on each social network should have its own identity. Let's talk a second really quickly about linked accounts, because this is one question you're going to get from students quite a bit. Is it okay if I have my Twitter and my Facebook account linked, or accounts linked? And the answer is no. So here's the reason why. This is just an example from a friend of mine. I'm in no way picking on her, because this happens all the time, especially with journalists. She actually has her accounts linked twice. And what I mean by that is, when you have your Twitter and your Facebook accounts linked, when you post to Facebook, it automatically posts to Twitter. Or when you post to Twitter, it automatically posts to Facebook. She actually has her accounts double linked. So then every time she posts, it's posting on the opposite network. So this was a Facebook post that was supposed to go on Twitter. This was a Twitter post that actually ended up on Facebook. This is why you see, the Twitter names aren't showing up anymore. It's a mess. So again, no offense to Sarah. She's a friend of mine. This happens all the time. So just tell them no. The only accounts that it's okay to link are Facebook and Instagram, because they work really well together. So if you link your Instagram account to Facebook, when you post on Instagram, it will post as it's supposed to Facebook, which, if you remember anything, Facebook owns Instagram, so that would make sense that those networks communicate well together. Second characteristic is it doesn't interrupt. So I think Jimmy Fallon especially has done a great job with this. His posts show up, first of all, the success of his show is really predicated on the fact that it's easily digested in small little bites, which is perfect for social content, right? So it's the reason why every morning when we wake up, there are a couple little bits from Fallon's show the night before that were popular and funny and that are spreading on social. So it's something that should just fit into the feed. This isn't something that should stick out like a sore thumb. In other words, it should just go with the flow to where you don't necessarily notice it in a bad way, is probably the best way to put it. Third characteristic, it doesn't make demands often. So we've already talked about the difference between jabs and right hooks. This would obviously be a right hook that we're talking about here. We don't want to throw those all the time. If you're a puncher who does nothing but throw right hooks, you're not going to win many fights. So you don't want to be that awkward friend who just constantly is asking for something. Let's talk for a second about those jabs. They sell nothing. So really all they're there to do is provide the voice of the brand, whatever that brand is, whether it's a business, a journalist, anything along those lines. They inform, they amuse, they entertain. Inform is a really important one, right? Especially for journalists. I mean, that's what we should be doing. But brands can do that too. There's a lot of information that brands have that people might find interesting. Those jabs do finally pay off when you throw a right hook. And so again, I challenge you to think of the brands you follow, or look for some brands that you are passionate about and see what they're doing on social. Therefore, you can have that conversation with your students about why they follow the brands they follow, because they're going to have some pretty passionate opinions. This is a good talking point on the first day or two of class, specifically in this class, talking to them about which social accounts they follow. Good social content leverages pop culture, and I should have an asterisk there because I should say to an extent. So we've seen some examples already that Jimmy John's tweet from earlier, that was definitely leveraging pop culture. They had someone watching the VMAs, and they were ready with a clever line right when it happened. This is probably the most popular example of this. A couple years ago when the power went out at the Super Bowl, Oreo sent out this now famous tweet that won all kinds of awards. But again, I challenge you to find better examples than this. There are a ton of current examples, and this is also one thing that I talk with students about, is I tell them to find me some examples of brands utilizing pop culture in a good way. I will caution about this because they can go wrong. So I mentioned Whataburger earlier as an example of a brand that students do enjoy, but Whataburger also swings and misses quite a bit on social. So in terms of trying too hard, so brands do have to be careful when it comes to trying too hard and leveraging that pop culture. Great social content is micro. Remember that these are little small introductions to your brand, your business, your work, what you are as a journalist, depending on whichever aspect you're coming at this from. There's oftentimes a mindset that social content has to be perfect from a brand point of view. And you obviously want to have some controls on it, right? And you have to have some quality control that comes along with it. But this mindset oftentimes leads to this, which is you're so worried about what to post that you just end up never posting. But again, it's micro content. This isn't some 4,000 word blog post or something that you're putting on social. That goes against the whole mindset when it comes to social content. And there is a discussion about quality versus quantity here. I oftentimes talk with students of which would you rather have? Would you rather have a ton of content, or would you rather have very little content, but what you get is great? And the answer should be somewhere in the middle. So especially when it comes from brands, we don't expect to get flooded, but we also don't want really crappy content. So the fine line is there somewhere in the middle in terms of getting that right, the sweet spot when it comes to social content. And then the last characteristic of great social content is that it is consistent. And when we say that, we mean with your brand or your voice. Great brands on social develop a voice, they develop an attitude, and people expect that to continue to come through. So this becomes a problem, or it could become a potential problem when you have multiple people posting on social for a brand, is that they have to be well-versed on the voice. And that's much easier said than done. So it's important that students understand, the workday flow in terms of social, which is a 24/7 job, and to know that there are probably dozens of people, especially at these large companies, working on these social accounts. And the hardest part of it is probably just making sure that it seems like there's only one person working on that account. So, like I said, we should be getting you Gary's book here shortly. Once you get it, read the first couple of chapters. The rest is really up to you. He just goes through the social networks. It's good stuff. He provides a lot of examples. They're a little outdated now because, again, that book's a couple years old. But it's really these first couple of chapters that are super important, and it's a very easy read. So I'll have some stuff up on the Facebook group. We'll also have a quiz if you want to see what kind of questions you could ask for this. And we will see you in the next module.